Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Shadow Storyteller. Before we begin tonight's tale, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I always enjoy reading what you think about our bedtime stories, and every interaction helps this channel grow so I can keep bringing you more chilling tales to listen to before you drift off to sleep. Now, let's dim the lights, take a deep breath, and step into the shadows together. It was late October, 2019, a Wednesday night. The kind of night when the air feels heavier than it should, when the mist curls low over the hedgerows, and every distant shape on the roadside seems wrong. I was driving back to Norwich with my friend Daniel after spending the afternoon in Ipswich. We had stayed far later than planned. A pub dinner at the Three Lanterns had turned into 2 hours of swapping old college stories and nursing pints we didn't really need. By the time we left, the last train had long gone, and the only road that could get us home before midnight was the infamous Route 17. Locals had warned us about it, telling stories about strange lights, phantom hitchhikers, and a stretch of woodland where the road seemed to disappear for a few seconds, leaving drivers convinced they were somewhere else entirely. I had always thought it was just one of those rural legends meant to keep kids from joyriding. But as the sat-nav screen flickered and the mist grew denser, Daniel glanced at me and muttered, "Mate, are you sure about this?" We had just passed the sign reading A1071. Stowmarket 12 miles, when the atmosphere seemed to change. The wind died, the car felt unnaturally insulated from the outside world, and even the familiar hum of the tires seemed muted. Street lamps became scarce, the trees loomed closer to the tarmac, and the moonlight struggled to pierce the fog. Around 10:47 p.m., as we rounded a bend near Ashbocking Woods, Daniel's voice cut through the silence. "Did you see that?" At first, I thought he was joking, but then I caught sight of her. A woman, standing on the narrow grass verge. Long hair, tangled and damp. A pale dress, though the color was hard to tell in the low light. Her face was turned away, but there was something about the way she stood. Not waving for help, not moving at all, just watching the empty lane ahead of her, that made my stomach twist. I slowed the car. "Don't," Daniel said sharply. His tone was different now. Low, urgent. I glanced in the rear-view mirror and froze. She was gone. The space where she had been, barely 10 feet from the car, was empty, as though she had never been there at all. Daniel was pale. "Mate, keep driving." I pressed the accelerator, trying to focus on the yellow center line, but the further we went, the more wrong everything felt. My phone's signal vanished completely. The dashboard clock froze at 10:53 p.m., even though I knew more time was passing, and from somewhere, impossible to tell if it was inside the car or out in the trees, came the faint sound of children laughing. Not the joyful kind, but the slow, breathless kind, like someone trying not to be heard, but failing. Daniel gripped the door handle, his knuckles white. "We need to get off this road. Now!" I wanted to answer him, but something about my throat felt tight, as if speaking would draw attention from whatever was out there. And then, just as we passed a broken milestone half hidden in the weeds. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Shadow Storyteller. Before we begin tonight's tale, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I always enjoy reading what you think about our bedtime stories, and every interaction helps this channel grow so I can keep bringing you more chilling tales to listen to before you drift off to sleep. Now, let's dim the lights, take a deep breath, and step into the shadows together. It was late October, 2019, a Wednesday night. The kind of night when the air feels heavier than it should, when the mist curls low over the hedgerows, and every distant shape on the roadside seems wrong. I was driving back to Norwich with my friend Daniel after spending the afternoon in Ipswich. We had stayed far later than planned. A pub dinner at the Three Lanterns had turned into 2 hours of swapping old college stories and nursing pints we didn't really need. By the time we left, the last train had long gone, and the only road that could get us home before midnight was the infamous Route 17. Locals had warned us about it, telling stories about strange lights, phantom hitchhikers, and a stretch of woodland where the road seemed to disappear for a few seconds, leaving drivers convinced they were somewhere else entirely. I had always thought it was just one of those rural legends meant to keep kids from joyriding. But as the sat-nav screen flickered and the mist grew denser, Daniel glanced at me and muttered, "Mate, are you sure about this?" We had just passed the sign reading A1071, Stowmarket 12 miles, when the atmosphere seemed to change. The wind died. The car felt unnaturally insulated from the outside world, and even the familiar hum of the tires seemed muted. Street lamps became scarce. The trees loomed closer to the tarmac, and the moonlight struggled to pierce the fog. Around 10:47 p.m., as we rounded a bend near Ashbocking Woods, Daniel's voice cut through the silence. "Did you see that?" At first, I thought he was joking, but then I caught sight of her. A woman, standing on the narrow grass verge. Long hair, tangled and damp. A pale dress, though the color was hard to tell in the low light. Her face was turned away, but there was something about the way she stood. Not waving for help, not moving at all, just watching the empty lane ahead of her. That made my stomach twist. I slowed the car. "Don't," Daniel said sharply. His tone was different now. Low, urgent. I glanced in the rear-view mirror and froze. She was gone. The space where she had been, barely 10 feet from the car, was empty, as though she had never been there at all. Daniel was pale. "Mate, keep driving." I pressed the accelerator, trying to focus on the yellow center line. But the further we went, the more wrong everything felt. My phone's signal vanished completely. The dashboard clock froze at 10:53 p.m., even though I knew more time was passing. And from somewhere, impossible to tell if it was inside the car or out in the trees, came the faint sound of children laughing. Not the joyful kind, but the slow, breathless kind, like someone trying not to be heard, but failing. Daniel gripped the door handle, his knuckles white. "We need to get off this road. Now!" I wanted to answer him, but something about my throat felt tight, as if speaking would draw attention from whatever was out there. And then, just as we passed a broken milestone half hidden in the weeds, the temperature inside the car dropped so sharply that a thin mist began to form on the inside of the windscreen. I rubbed at it with my sleeve, but no matter how much I wiped, it just kept returning. Out of instinct, I checked the side mirror and nearly swerved. Behind us, in the beam of the rear lights, there was movement. At first, it looked like drifting fog, but then I saw the outline of something running. Not quite human in the way it moved, too fast and too jerky, its limbs snapping forward in sharp angles. Its head was tilted to one side as it gained on us, the pale shape cutting through the darkness without any sound of footsteps. Daniel saw it too. "Faster!" he hissed. I pressed harder on the accelerator, the engine groaning as we climbed a shallow incline. But even at 50 miles an hour, the shape stayed behind us, matching our speed, swaying from one side of the road to the other, as though it was deciding which way to pounce. Then, without warning, the headlights flickered. The road ahead seemed to shimmer, and for a split second, I saw something that made my skin crawl. The tarmac gone, replaced by a muddy, rutted track under a starless sky, with crooked trees arching over it like skeletal hands. The vision lasted less than a heartbeat, and then the normal road snapped back into view. Daniel was breathing hard now. "You saw that, didn't you?" I didn't answer. The air inside the car was so cold I could see each breath I exhaled, and my hands were beginning to ache from gripping the steering wheel too tightly. A sign appeared ahead, its white letters almost swallowed by the fog. I squinted to read it, Easton 4 miles, and felt a small surge of relief. If we could just make it there, we could stop somewhere with people around. But as we passed the sign, the sound of laughter came again, louder this time, overlapping voices in tones too high and too fast to make out. Something tapped against the passenger window. Once, twice, a slow, deliberate rhythm. Daniel jerked his head towards it, but there was nothing there, only the rolling fog pressing against the glass. He muttered something under his breath, but his voice was so low I couldn't catch the words. The shape behind us had vanished, but that didn't make me feel any safer. If anything, it made my skin crawl even more, as though whatever it was had simply found another way in. I kept my eyes fixed on the road, refusing to look at the mirrors now. That was when the smell hit me, damp earth mold, and something faintly metallic, like rusted iron. I knew that smell. It was the smell of the old graveyard near my childhood home, after a week of rain. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could, the radio, which had been silent the whole trip, crackled to life. It wasn't music or a broadcast, but a voice, distant and muffled, repeating the same phrase over and over in a language I didn't recognize. Daniel reached for the dial, but the moment his fingers brushed it, the voice stopped, replaced by a single, sharp breath that sounded like it was right behind my ear. My vision blurred for a second. I blinked hard, trying to clear it, and when I focused again, I realized the road had narrowed without me noticing. The hedgerows were closer, the trees taller, and there were no junctions, no turnoffs, nothing but the winding strip of tarmac ahead. The sat-nav screen was blank now, the blue arrow gone, the map replaced by a static gray field. Daniel shifted in his seat. "I think we've been here before." His words sent a cold shiver through me, because I had been thinking the same thing. The broken milestone. The way the bend curved left then right. The same leaning oak tree with its hollow trunk. We were looping. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell began to toll. Slow. Measured. I counted the chimes, 11 in total. But when I glanced at the dashboard clock, it still read 10:53 p.m. I pressed harder on the accelerator, the engine whining in protest. My pulse was thundering in my ears now, and every muscle in my body screamed to get off this cursed road. But the more I drove, the less it felt like we were moving forward. And then, from the fog ahead, a figure stepped into the center of the lane. The figure emerged slowly from the fog, as if the night itself was pushing it forward. At first, it was just a darker shape against the gray mist, but as my headlights caught it, I realized it was a man, or at least, it had the shape of one. He was tall, impossibly thin, wearing what looked like an old-fashioned overcoat that hung too heavily from his frame, the fabric moving slightly even though there was no wind. His head was bowed, his face shadowed by the brim of a wide, weather hat, the kind I had only ever seen in black and white photographs. I slammed my foot on the brake, the tires squealing against the damp tarmac. Daniel gripped the dashboard, his eyes wide. The car shuddered to a stop barely 6 feet from the man, but he didn't flinch. He simply stood there, head lowered, arms hanging limply at his sides. For a few seconds, no one moved. I leaned forward slightly, trying to get a better look at his face, but the moment I did, he began to raise his head. Slowly, deliberately, the shadows shifted, revealing skin that was pale to the point of gray, stretched too tightly over sharp cheekbones. His eyes were the worst part. Not empty, but filled with a dull, milky white, like glass that had been left in the sea for decades. Daniel whispered, "Drive around him." I tried. My hands trembled as I turned the wheel to edge past. But as soon as the car began to move, the figure took a step forward. His movements were jerky, unnatural, his limbs bending at strange angles. I swerved slightly, the left wheels dipping into the grass verge, and managed to pass him. My eyes stayed on the road, but I could feel the weight of his gaze following us. We drove in silence for a few moments, the only sound the engine and my own uneven breathing. Then Daniel's voice came, tight and low. "He's still there." I glanced into the side mirror and felt my stomach drop. The man was walking in the middle of the road behind us, perfectly centered between the white lines. He wasn't running, yet somehow he was keeping up. The mist seemed to bend around him, and with every few seconds, his figure became clearer, as if he was drawing closer even without moving faster. The road ahead twisted into another bend, and I focused on it, hoping that if we got far enough, he would be gone. But when we straightened out again, the sight made my skin crawl. There he was, not behind us anymore, but ahead, standing in the exact same position as before, head bowed, blocking the lane. Daniel swore under his breath. "This road's not right." I didn't want to admit it, but I could feel it too. We weren't driving through space normally anymore. It was as if the road was folding in on itself, looping us through the same cursed stretch over and over. I gripped the wheel tighter, my knuckles aching, and pressed harder on the accelerator, swerving sharply to the left to avoid him this time. The car jolted, but we passed without stopping. The mist thickened even further now, clinging to the windows, swirling in shapes that seemed almost human before dissolving again. I caught myself staring at one particularly dark patch, thinking it looked like a face, eyes, mouth, teeth, before it melted back into formless vapor. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds. Time didn't feel real anymore. The dashboard clock still read 10:53 p.m. My chest felt tight, as if the air in the car was getting thinner. Then, far ahead, I saw lights. Not headlights, but a warm, flickering glow, like lanterns. Relief surged through me. Maybe a farmhouse, maybe even a small village. I pushed the car faster, the engine growling, my eyes locked on that inviting glow. But as we drew nearer, the lights shifted, as though they weren't fixed to anything solid. They floated, drifting lazily across the road before vanishing into the trees. One moment they were golden, the next a cold, almost greenish white. My skin prickled. I remembered the local legends Daniel had told me once, about will-o'-the-wisps luring travelers into swamps and bogs. Daniel's voice was shaking now. "Don't follow them. Just stay on the road." I nodded, but the problem was the road was disappearing. The tarmac beneath us had begun to fade into something darker, rougher, like old cobblestones slick with moss. The hedgerows gave way to towering black trees, their branches knitting together above us, blocking out the moon entirely. The headlights barely reached more than a few feet ahead, swallowed by the gloom. From somewhere deep in those trees came a sound. Not the laughter from before, but a low, drawn-out moan. It rose and fell like the wind, but there was something unmistakably human about it. Daniel's breathing quickened. I felt his hand brush against my arm. Whether for reassurance or fear, I wasn't sure. We came to another bend, and my stomach turned cold. Parked on the verge ahead was an old, rusted car. The kind from the 1970s, with peeling paint and shattered windows. Its headlights were on, dim and yellowed, pointing uselessly into the fog. I slowed as we passed, my eyes darting to the driver's seat. Someone was inside. A man, slumped over the wheel, his face obscured by the shadow of his hat. He wore the same coat, the same wide-brimmed hat as the figure we had seen before. As we passed, his head began to lift. I didn't wait to see his face. I hit the accelerator, the tires spinning briefly before gripping the road. The fog behind us seemed to close like a curtain. The trees pressed even closer, their branches scraping along the roof and sides of the car with a sound like fingernails on metal. My pulse pounded in my ears, and I began to wonder if we would ever see open fields again. Then, faintly, through the trees, I saw another sign. The same one as before. Easton 4 miles. Daniel let out a trembling breath. We're back here again. My hands shook on the wheel. I didn't want to admit it, but he was right. We were trapped. The road wasn't leading anywhere. It was keeping us here, looping us through its cursed heart. Somewhere in that endless circle, the pale woman, the thin man, the laughter, and the lights were all waiting, watching. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. We need to try something else. But before I could decide what that was, the radio crackled again. This time there was no foreign phrase, no static, just a voice. Low, slow, and unmistakably directed at us. You can't leave. The words hung in the freezing air of the car. Daniel's face turned towards me, pale and wide-eyed, but he didn't speak. The road ahead stretched into darkness, the mist waiting to swallow us whole. And somewhere behind us, I thought I saw the shape of the thin man again, stepping into the lane. The voice lingered in the air long after the radio went silent, as if the words had seeped into the fabric of the car itself. I could feel them pressing against my skin, sinking deep enough that I knew I would still hear them in my head, even if I smashed the radio to pieces. Daniel didn't say anything, but his breathing had grown quick and shallow, the way someone breathes when they're trying not to panic. I kept my eyes locked on the road, but every shadow felt like it was leaning closer. Every patch of fog seemed to curl in a little tighter around the car. A part of me wanted to slam on the brakes, throw the car into reverse, and drive back the way we had come. But something told me there was no back anymore. The thoughts settled over me like ice. This road wasn't just a place on a map. It was something else, something that decided when and if you could leave. The mist ahead shifted, pulling apart just enough to reveal the outline of a crossroads. I hadn't seen a single junction since we'd entered this cursed stretch, and the sight made my chest tighten with cautious hope. The sat-nav was still a dead gray screen, but I slowed the car anyway, eyes scanning the signs that loomed at the intersection. There were two. One pointed left, its letters faded almost to nothing, the metal warped and bent. The other pointed right, The white paint still clear despite the rust. Both had place names I didn't recognize. Not in Norfolk, not in Suffolk, not anywhere I'd ever heard of. Daniel leaned forward, squinting. "Do you know where those are?" I shook my head. "Do you?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. The mist swirled again, as though impatient for us to choose. I hesitated, then turned the wheel to the right. The tires crunched over loose gravel before finding tarmac again. But almost immediately I knew something was wrong. The road was narrower here, barely wide enough for the car, and the trees were so close that their branches brushed the wing mirrors. There were no markings, no reflective signs, only the winding strip of black that vanished into fog barely 30 feet ahead. For a few minutes, the only sounds were the engine and the occasional rasp of a branch against the roof. Then came the smell, damp, stale, and heavy, like rotting leaves mixed with something sharper, metallic. My stomach twisted at the familiarity. It was the same scent I'd smelled earlier, the graveyard smell. I was about to say something when the headlights caught movement. A figure on the left side of the road, barely visible through the mist. Not the pale woman, not the thin man. This one was small, hunched, wrapped in a shawl that looked soaked through. As we passed, she lifted her head just enough for me to see her face. Or what should have been her face. There were no eyes, only smooth, stretched skin where they should have been. Daniel let out a sharp breath. I pressed the accelerator without thinking, pushing the car faster along the twisting road. But the faster I drove, the more figures began to appear. Some stood still, facing the road. Others moved, slow and awkward, as though they'd forgotten how to walk. None of them spoke. None of them made a sound. But every time we passed one, I felt the cold deepen in my chest. We rounded another bend, and there he was again, the thin man, standing dead center in the lane. I swerved hard to the left, tires skidding on the damp road, and just managed to miss him. In the rear-view mirror, his head turned to follow us, even though his body didn't move. Daniel gripped the seatbelt strap across his chest. "We're not getting out, are we?" I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that we'd find a way, but the words wouldn't come. Ahead, the road began to slope downwards, the gradient steep enough that I had to ease off the accelerator. The trees here were older, thicker, their trunks wide enough that you could hide an entire car behind one. The fog clung low to the ground now, curling around the roots and pooling in the dips along the verge. Then I saw the bridge. It was made of stone, dark and glistening with damp, arching over a narrow river that looked black under the moonlight. The bridge had no guardrails, only a low, crumbling wall on either side. Halfway across, I slowed without meaning to. The air felt different here, colder, heavier, like the weight of the water below was pressing up through the stones. From beneath the bridge came the faintest sound. Not laughter this time. Not the moan. This was whispering. Dozens of voices, overlapping, too quiet to make out words. They rose and fell with the faint trickle of the river, until suddenly they all stopped at once. The silence was so sharp it hurt my ears. We rolled off the far side of the bridge and back onto the open road. But the moment the tires hit tarmac again, something hit the roof of the car. A single, heavy thud, hard enough to make the metal shudder. Daniel's head snapped up, eyes darting to the ceiling. "Keep going," he muttered, but I could see him looking at the glass above his head as though expecting it to crack. Another thud came, then another, faster now, like footsteps running across the roof. I pressed the accelerator, the car jerking forward, But whatever was up there didn't fall away. The sound followed us for nearly 100 meters before vanishing completely. When we finally slowed, the road had changed again. Gone were the trees and hedges. Now the land opened up on either side, though the fog still kept us from seeing more than a few feet into the fields. The tarmac looked older, cracked in places, weeds pushing up through the gaps. And there, in the distance, was a building. It was a small cottage, its walls a pale gray, its roof sagging slightly. One window glowed faintly with yellow light, the only sign of life we'd seen since Ipswich. I slowed the car as we approached, unsure if stopping was a good idea but desperate for something. Anything human. Daniel stared at the window. "Do you think—" he trailed off. The front door creaked open before he could finish. A figure stood there, framed in the glow from inside. At first, I thought it was just a woman in a long dress, but then she stepped forward, and my stomach clenched. It was the pale woman from The Verge, the same damp hair, the same motionless stance. Only now she was smiling. It was not a smile of welcome. All right, let's wrap it up for tonight's journey down Route 17. If you've made it this far, you've probably realized that some roads are more than just asphalt and paint. They carry whispers of the past, fragments of tragedy, and echoes that refuse to fade. Whether what we saw was real or just the tricks of an exhausted mind, I'll never be able to drive that way without remembering the pale faces in the mist, the figure in the headlights, and the way the night air felt so heavy it was almost hard to breathe. So, my friends, as you turn off the light and let the darkness settle around you, remember this. Hauntings aren't always confined to old houses or forgotten graveyards. Sometimes, they're waiting for you in the most ordinary places, like a lonely stretch of road on a cold English night. Sleep well, if you can. And if you ever find yourself on Route 17, keep your eyes on the road, because someone or something might be watching you back. Until the next story, this is Shadow Storyteller, wishing you good night and safe travels. Ask ChatGPT.